How can we find transposition levels that create smooth chord changes for any chord? In this final episode of the Parsimonious Voiceleading series, we're going to learn to use the intervals in chords to tell us which transposition levels will give us the most common tones between changes. First, I have to say a big thank you to Voronska, who's a theory professor that proofreads my scripts. He wanted me to make it clear that the common tones technique we're going to learn about here may have to do with smoothness, but it's not exactly the same as parsimonious voice leading. To figure out all of the parsimonious voice leading possibilities for chords, like the major and minor triad like we did last episode, you pretty much have to guess and check all the possibilities. Voronska has coded algorithms for computers to calculate all that, and if anyone wants to help us develop an app for that eventually, that would be great. But we're actually going to put parsimonious voice leading aside in this episode and focus on how many common tones we can get for each transposition level of a chord. Common tones refers to pitches that don't move in a chord change that are common to both chords. For example, when we move from C to E minor, E and G are common tones between the two chords because they remain present in both chords without moving. We can see how these common tones help make the chord change sound smooth because while the chord is changing, these pitches remain constant. The key to determining how many common tones we can get for each transposition level is by looking at all the intervals contained in a chord. In set theory, we show the total interval content of chords in something called an interval vector. I have a whole video explaining interval vectors I recommend watching, but for now just know that it's easy to look up interval content in set theory charts, and that the number of each interval present in a chord are displayed in order from half steps on the left to tritones on the right. A chord will have as many common tones for a transposition level as it has number of intervals for each interval. Meaning, if a chord has one whole step and it's transposed at the level of a whole step, it will have one common tone. Let's try analyzing a dominant seventh chord as an example. Here's the interval vector for a seventh chord, which tells us we have 0 half steps, 1 whole step, 2 minor thirds, 1 major third, 1 fourth, and 1 tritone. Since the seventh chord has 2 minor thirds, a seventh chord moving a minor third away, say from C7 to E flat 7, will have 2 common tones. In this case, the G and B flat remain constant. Transpositions work in both directions like we described in the last episode, meaning a transposition down a minor third or up a major sixth from C7 to A7 would give us 2 common tones as well. What we can deduce from looking at the interval vector for the dominant seventh chord is that the transposition level of a minor third gives us the most amount of common tones, the level of a half step gives us the least amount, and all of the other transposition levels are in the middle with 1 common tone. You might be wondering why the interval content is able to tell us about common tone transpositions, so I'm going to break this down as simple as I can so that it becomes obvious. Imagine we just have a minor third by itself, C and E flat. If we transpose it up a minor third, we get E flat and G flat, which as we can see gives us 1 common tone with E flat remaining constant. If our C and E flat dyad was transposed down a minor third, we'd get A and C, which keeps C constant. This same effect is going on with bigger chords with more intervals. When a chord contains a particular interval, even if that interval is hidden in the middle of the chord, a common tone will be held constant when transposed at the level of that interval. We would need Voronska's fancy algorithms to determine common tones between changes of different chords, but we can determine the transposition levels with the most common tones by looking at the interval vector for any chord as long as we move between the same 2 types of chords. In my Scriabin's atonality series, I showed that the mystic chord had the most common tones at the level of a whole step, major third, and tritone. Sure enough, the interval vector shows us we will get 4 common tones for each of those transposition levels. The tritone is a special interval that counts for double the common tones at its transposition level, and that's because it's the symmetrical interval that maps onto itself when moved a tritone. If we were to isolate the tritone dyad C and F sharp and transpose it a tritone away, we'd get F sharp and C, giving us 2 common tones. To go back to our dominant 7th example, if we transpose C7 to F sharp 7, we get 2 common tones, E and B flat, and this is precisely why jazz musicians are able to substitute chords a tritone away, calling it tritone substitution. If you want to look up the interval vector for a set, you can use a set theory app or check out one of the set theory charts available on my website in the description. Sometimes we find a cool chord but aren't sure how to move with it. This video has taught us to look up a chord's interval content and transpose it at the level of which it contains the most intervals. That's if you're looking for a smooth chord change, of course. Sometimes composers purposely choose a chord change with no common tones to create an abrupt sounding chord change. While the Set Theory Simplified series taught us about static chords, this series gives us a glimpse into how chords move. It's fascinating to me that the properties within a static chord tells us about the common tones that may result from it moving. I challenge you all to explore the ideas in this series with the chords that you play with. I hope to teach you all more about the intersection between set theory and transformational theory. Please like, comment, subscribe, join the Discord, check out my links, and give me some feedback on the series.